Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Key, and welcome to the Mogul Millennial Business Interview Series. And today we have an incredible special guest, Sequoia Taylor, who works in a very newly created or an industry that a lot of people don't know about. And we refer to it as private placements. So, Sequoia, how are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Hi, Justin. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I want to get into it because this industry sounds very interesting and also extremely lucrative if you have the skill set to really be able to dominate the market. Okay, now before we get into private placements, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and you specifically?
Yes, of course. Well, I'm a Memphis native, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I went to Wellesley College. And after college, I graduated in 2008, first of all. I think that's important to know. I graduated during the worst recession we've had since now. um, and I was very interested in going to Silicon Valley, going to work for Microsoft, trying to, follow in Bill Gates' footsteps, but eventually landed upon investment banking after a couple of semesters of computer science. I realized, working in engineering is probably not going to be for me. So throughout college, I set my sights on Wall Street. And then, of course, graduating in 2008 made it really difficult. So my background is basically from Memphis to the Boston area where I went to college. And then I settled upon a job in LA where I was doing investment banking work for a small boutique firm because a lot of the bulge bracket firms weren't really hiring when I came out.
Now, from moving to Los Angeles from the Boston area, you then found your way into private placements. Like how was that and what is it?
Yeah, just to back up a bit. So private placements is basically a function within investment banking. So within the investment banking industry, you have mergers and acquisitions, you have, capital markets, you have trading and sales. Private placements is just a function of investment banking. And so when I first graduated, I was doing investment banking. I was an analyst working long hours, working on pitch books, working on Excel models for people so that they could try to get deal flow. My work in private placements actually didn't start until more recently, until my switch out of banking and back into it kind of. So I'll have to go through that whole thing as well for you. So once I left college and started investment banking, I did that for a couple of years in LA. And then because of family reasons, I moved back to Tennessee to continue doing investment banking. So all in all, I spent over 5 years doing investment banking for, boutique or regional firms. And what that means is basically your typical, working for a group where you're the analyst, you're the lowest person on the poll, and you're doing these Excel models, you're doing these pitch books, and you're up all night, and you're trying to basically help your managing partners or managing directors win deals, so that they could go and sell bonds, so that they could go and do M&A with whatever companies the firm could get. So after investment banking, I decided, okay, this isn't for me. I don't want to spend my life doing investment banking on the sell side. I don't want to be working all these hours and trying to claw my way to the top. So I eventually went out to San Francisco to try my hand at startups. So I actually moved from investment banking into tech, which is a totally different thing. So I went from Wall Street to Silicon Valley and decided, okay, I can't be an engineer because I didn't do the engineering in college, but there is a business side of tech and maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do business development or sales. So I went and actually started working in sales at tech companies. And after that, I decided, okay, if I want to get into the next Uber or the next Facebook, the next big thing, I don't really know what that's going to be. No one knows. It's going to be a gamble either way. So the best thing to do is probably bet on myself. At least that's the advice I was given, right? So I decided that I wanted to start my own thing, but I didn't have a good idea for a big startup company. And so I did have the experience from investment banking. So that's when I started doing private placements for myself. I started helping people who had shares in these private startup companies in Silicon Valley. I started helping them sell their shares on what's called the secondary market. And that just basically means sell their shares to someone for a second time after they've been issued to them the first time.
So now let's put the business side aside for a minute. How do you function moving across the country in a whole industry of tech that you're not familiar with and become an entrepreneur? Because usually those things are completely three separate worlds, but somehow you were able to blend the three together and be very successful.
Yeah, well, it's not for a lot of failure and a lot of, hustle, I would say. I'm always that person who's following up whenever I meet somebody, following up about the coffee we just had and seeing how I can be helpful. I was always knocking on the door. There was definitely not a clear-cut path for me, but I definitely had to go and create one and forge my own path. So it was definitely a lot of hustle. Getting into investment banking was easier for me because I went to a college where they recruited from. So that was pretty much clear-cut and outlined, but then graduating in 2008 made it a little harder. And then deciding that mid-career I was going to move over into technology where, there wasn't a school's recruiting office to go from, or a set of interviews for a season that I could take. That was just grit, hustle, networking. So I went out to Silicon Valley on several trips before I moved, just started talking to people, looking at blogs, getting on Twitter, tweeting with different venture capitalists, meeting up with people. One of my mentors, who I still talk to today, tells everybody that when he met me, first thing I said was, "You're going to be my mentor and I'm going to get into Silicon Valley." So, you just kind of have to make your own way and forge your way in, kind of thing. Some people come from, Stanford, and it's very easy for them, right? It's a school that's out there already. A lot of the tech companies recruit there, but for those of us that don't go to Stanford, you have to make your own way, and that's just what I did. So I was able to get into an early stage startup. And a lot of my connections came from my current college network, right? So I did go to a very nice school on the East Coast where there was a really wide network. And I actually had a network of students from my current college and then also the surrounding schools. And one of those people actually helped me, get my first rotational internship in tech. So it's all about networking.
It's all about networking. And just to even go a little bit more personal, you're a young Black woman in tech. Like we've read the headlines of how tech isn't as open to minorities. First of all, Blacks, and then the other diaspora of people of color. How are you able to do this as a Black woman?
A lot of people, ask me that, and I think it really just comes down to mindset. It's really not something I can put my finger on and say, here's the formula to get it. It's all about the mindset. You have to feel like you deserve it and that it should be yours to begin with, to even, start this process, to go for something like this. I've always been in situations since high school where I'm one of few Black people. So I think that was nothing foreign to me. And then post-college, going into the investment banking world, I was also one of very few women. So I knew that any of the jobs that I wanted, where there's a lot of opportunity, especially economic opportunity, there are going to be lots of men there, white males particularly. And so that's where the opportunities are. And so that's where I'm going to have to get used to that idea. So I think it's a mindset shift, first and foremost. And then for me, I used it to my advantage. In my job now, I'm one of the only Black females I know doing this, and a lot of people remember me for it. It sets me apart. I use my diversity as a strength.
What does a day look like in your life? Like that so this seems very interesting. So what does a day look like in your life?
Yeah, of course. So these days, I'm no longer doing investment banking, which I started out doing for the first 5 years. I'm no longer working till 2 a.m. on pitch books and financial models for, a hierarchical structure for managing director, vice president, or associate. These days, I'm working for myself. So I am all of those things. I'm the managing director, I'm the associate, I'm all of it. So I basically help people sell their shares in these tech companies. So say you have an employee who has worked at a company like, say, Uber before they went public for 5 years. They have been given stock options that can one day become worth something when the company goes public. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a little niche market that not a lot of people know about called the secondary market. And people who've been given shares primarily on the primary market by their company can resell those shares given certain restrictions and whatever the company allows, they can resell those shares on the secondary market before the company goes public. And so I help people who have the ability to sell those shares before the company goes public. So there are employees out there at these tech companies that are sitting on what could be millions of dollars, and they want to go buy a house or they want to go start a new company of their own, but they can't because they're waiting for the IPO. And the IPO time window is getting longer. So companies are not going public as quickly as they used to. I think the average IPO window is now something around 10 years, whereas it used to be 5.
You just talked about what you do for clients. How do you get these particular clients?
So my clients are all going to be word of mouth. So these are going to be people that want to sell their shares quickly and quietly, and they don't really want a lot of people in their business. These days, especially, I'm working with much larger clients, so the deal sizes are much larger. I'm going to be going out to my network of venture capitalists, of investment bankers who are at the large banks like I used to be. And I'm going to be saying, if you know anybody that wants to get liquid, let me know. And that's kind of, a signal for anybody that wants to sell their shares. And so all of my deal flow to date has been inbound, meaning people have come to me because they've heard about me, which goes back to the importance of networking and hustle. Because I could have a coffee with someone in January and nothing comes of that coffee, but they remember me. And in June, I get a call from a friend of theirs that says they should talk to me. And it's happened several times.
Okay. How do you organize this? Are there certain tech tools, or how do you organize your day with clients and money and things of that nature?
Oh, of course. That's a good question. So outside of the basic Google products, using Google Sheets to organize a pipeline of deals I'm currently working on, I have in the past used a CRM system like Salesforce, but it became too bulky for me. So, I'm really pretty simple. I'm using Google Sheets a lot. I'm using Google Docs just to organize my flow of deals, organize my network of potential outreach. I'm using I'm using Yesware and other email tools like that to make sure I'm staying on top of who I've emailed and following up with them on an email to see if they still want to sell shares later down the road, things like that.
And you can do this from anywhere in the world.
Correct. So I'm 100% remote, and I have been for the past 5 years.
Okay. So within the last 5 years of doing this, well, you've been remote in the last 5 years, and the private placement market, you've been in 2, 3?
So ever since I've been in this business, I've been remote. So I've never worked in an office for this. I could afford to have my own office, but I figured why spend that money, that overhead? I belong to several private clubs where I have access to meeting spaces for people. And I've decided that I just didn't need to, waste the funds on an office space when really I could do this from my iPhone or my laptop.
Incredible transition, because you've done millions of dollars in deals.
Yeah, so the transaction volume I've done, it can be intimidating when people hear it. It doesn't mean that's how much money I made, but it does mean that's the amount of money I've helped other people make. And every time I help someone else make money, I make money. So it's a good thing. So transaction volume is an important metric for me in my business.
I mean, you're the $1 million deal maker.
Yeah, so it's the numbers are really big, like I said, and intimidating. But in this market and in financial services in general, $1 million does not go a long way. So it is not uncommon for me to be helping someone someone to liquidate a $50 million check for themselves. I talk to people all day long who need to get 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, so that they could go do whatever they need to do with their lives.
Okay.
$1 million is actually small in my world.
Well, let us know, Ms. Taylor. let us know. So this is a new market that you stated that a lot of people aren't in, especially a lot of Black women. What advice would you give to someone who may be interested in this particular market?
It's very competitive. It's very niche. There aren't many people doing it. And I would say everybody who I have, talked to says that it's pretty mercenary. So It's definitely cutthroat, right? That's what I mean by mercenary. So, if you're interested in helping people get liquidity, you're going to have to build your own book of business. It's not a situation where people play nicely with each other. You should think of it like being a real estate agent, except there aren't many houses to sell. So we get paid anytime a deal is done, a buyer and seller are matched together. Mm-hmm. But the landscape of deals is very small. And so, you're going to need a differentiator to set yourself apart to, be able to do this. And there are a lot of large companies now forming groups to try to take this online and make this more efficient, to just cut down on the number of needed intermediaries as well.
Okay. Now, what's the timeline for you to close a deal? Or what's from your experience?
So I would say anywhere from 30 to 180 days. So 1 to 6 months, I think, is the average. And no two deals are alike. Everything is pretty bespoke in that the sellers are going to be different and the buyers are going to be different, and the terms of the deal, things like that. And it's a niche market, meaning the people who are in it are very experienced in investment banking or venture capital or private equity or some form of all three. So your plain vanilla deal is nothing to these people. So I've, been in investment banking since I graduated in 2008, in some form of investment banking or tech. So I'm probably the youngest that I've seen, one of the youngest people doing this, and that's still 12 years of experience. Okay. So it's a very gray-haired market. And I think for that and I think the nature of it makes it more conducive to people who have seen lots of different types of deals, because everything is bespoke and everything is complicated.
Okay. Now, would you say someone needs a background in investment banking or tech, or so if someone is a high school student and they think this is an attractive area to go into, what would you say for them to study or recommend?
Yeah, I would say jumping in this is not something that's going to be worth your time, just because you would need to already have some kind of knowledge of the deal process. So either from an investment banking job or from working in venture capital and late stage venture capital. I would also say that the time horizon or the outlook for this type of thing is kind of bleak, honestly, because I think that a lot of people are going to be consolidating, like I said, and doing this more efficiently online under the banner of a few of the bigger companies that are starting to move this market online. And so for people like me, it's going to be really important to be differentiated and also to have your own fund behind you, which is probably my next act, to raise a fund.
And can you explain that, raise a fund?
When I say raise a fund, I mean go out to limited partners, which are pension funds, hedge funds, family offices, and people who actually have capital, and ask them to give you or set aside that capital for you to invest for them. So that's what venture capitalists do. That's what private equity funds do. The money that they're investing is money that other people are saying, I don't want to pick the places to put it myself. I want to give some of it, allocate some of it to you to help pick it for me. So a late stage fund is something that I'm looking towards doing next. And I think anybody in this market has to have kind of a next act, because it's definitely going the way of, all being automated and less of a need for intermediaries. There's still probably going to be a need for, a small percentage of the people that do this, just because there are going to always be people that don't want their business online. But I think for the most part, I think, these kinds of transactions are going to be done at the company level, and they're going to be done online.
Sequoia, where can the Mogul Millennial audience follow you, find more about you, what you're doing, and perhaps there's a potential client that will be seeing this interview and is like, let me reach out to Sequoia Taylor. How can they do that?
Yeah, so my website is just my name, sequoiataylor.com, and you'll find links to all of my social media there. And that's SequoiaTaylor. And then all of my social media handles are the same. They're SEQ23.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sequoia. Mogul Millennial audience, please follow the Sequoia Taylor and find out more about the private placement industry because it is one heck of an industry that I think most people don't know about but should. And once again, thank you, Sequoia Taylor, the $1 Million Deal Maker. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, Dan.